Hi everyone, and welcome to week 1 of Learning in Higher Education. So I look forward to seeing you guys in the tutorials, but we will be having our online lectures first. And before we start, I just wanted to show you guys what will be at the beginning of each week's lecture, which will be an outline of exactly what we'll be covering each week. There'll be 3 main concepts that we will be exploring this week in the lecture and expanding upon those in the tutorials, as well as looking at the various assessments that we will be covering. Now, the 3 things that we'll be covering are inquiry or inquiry as learning. There's actually 2 pronunciations for this word, both are valid. Now, the goal for this is that you guys will explore and reflect on the role of inquiry and questioning in learning and research. Secondly, we'll be talking about learning in a connected age, and we will investigate the connectivist theory of learning. Thirdly, we'll be looking at critical digital literacies today, which is the process of finding, evaluating, analyzing, and communicating information digitally. So I hope this gives you an idea of what to expect so that you can navigate through the lectures provided in little bite-sized pieces on the slides. It's important to note that I'm not just going to put this piece of information, another slide, another random slide. I'll give you exactly what we're going to cover at the beginning, and I hope that really helps you know how to organize the concepts in your mind as well as in your notes and reviews. Here's something you should know as well. The lectures are interactive, which means that there will be points at which you'll interact with something, click on a link, read something, maybe do a little bit of research, figure out a puzzle or question, think about something before moving on. So it's not that I'm delivering all this information to you in video form. No, because that's boring. That's just like school where the teacher apparently knows everything and gives you all the pieces of the puzzle, and you don't really have to be involved very much or be an active learner, have to think and process and research and all that. Well, you guys are internet age people, digital natives most likely. So what we'll be doing is kind of like a treasure hunt. There'll be clues, there'll be pointers, resources, things like that, but you have to do a little bit of the treasure hunting yourself, and there will be some of the pieces of the puzzle given, but not every piece. Hopefully that keeps things interesting, and we will be looking at these things in the tutorials, combining tutorials and lectures together in a more integrated way. So it's not like you're left on your own. We'll be discussing a lot of these concepts, but you'll have a little bit of discovery to do on your own as well.
I'm ready to know what the people know. Ask them my questions and get some answers. What's a fire and why does it, what's the word, burn?
So let's start with chapter 1, Inquiry as Learning. Now, I'm going to read a little quote to you from this book called Teaching as a Subversive Activity. Consider, for example, where knowledge comes from. It isn't just there in a book waiting for someone to come along and learn it. Knowledge is produced in response to questions, and new knowledge results from the asking of new questions. Quite often, new questions about old questions. Here is the point. Once you have learned how to ask questions, relevant and appropriate and substantial questions, you have learned how to learn, and no one can keep you from learning whatever you want or need to know. What does this quote mean to you? What does it say? You can take a moment to figure it out, and we'll discuss it a little bit more in relation to academic research in the next few slides. Now we have the basic idea from Postman and Weingartner that learning comes from asking questions or from identifying problems and wanting to find solutions and answers to those problems. Inquiry, asking questions, leads to learning and research. Learning and research are essentially the same thing. When we are researching, we're finding information for the very first time, sometimes directly from the source. We observe something that's actually happening, we research it, we try to understand it, and we try to, express this knowledge that we have discovered. For example, if you were to go on a spaceship, go to a planet, and you are researching that planet and you're finding everything about it, what kind of things live there, what kind of minerals are found on its surface, where is it, you're researching, you're finding all this out for the first time. However, learning isn't that different from research. Why? Because when you learn something, you develop an understanding of it, and you are actually learning about it for the first time. Now, we often learn secondhand from people who have already done the research, and we learn from them. However, we learn the most effectively when we do two things. Firstly, we ask the questions rather than just someone giving us a bunch of information that we need to know. We articulate the questions ourselves and we ask them for ourselves. Secondly, we learn better when we construct an understanding of the concepts for ourselves, when we can express it in our own words. Basically, when you learn something well enough to communicate and teach it to someone else, articulate it in your own words, perhaps make your own notes, create your own chart or infographic or video. When you produce information in your own creative way, you have learned it better than if you had just read it in a book and remembered what the words say. So here are a couple of reflective questions that you can work on. Firstly, think of a discovery or invention. What were the questions asked that led to that discovery? Secondly, how would your life be different without the internet? How have web search engines impacted your education? And lastly, do you think online research can replace formal education? If you can Google anything, do you still need to go to school or a college to find, information to be given to you in textbook form for you to remember and repeat? Now here are two links for you. One is a 3-minute thesis video, and I want you to try and identify what the research question is. The thesis is a research project by a student, whether a PhD student or a researcher of some kind, and the question that they ask, what was that question? What were they trying to find out in their research? Secondly, I'm providing a link to a study done of Manej, Malaysia students, and I would like you to look through this study, read the abstract, which is the summary, and then look through the PDF and find the research questions in there. Identify the research questions. So now we begin chapter 2. We're going to be looking at connectivism, a learning theory for the digital age. And so we're going to be looking at a piece of reading. It's a publication, but it's available online. So you can just click immediately, go to this website, which is actually an online textbook available free, and I would like you to read through this article, but I have 3 questions to guide your reading of this. Firstly, why does the author believe that a new learning theory is necessary? Why is learning different in the digital age? We're still humans, we still learn in the same way. Why is it different? Why is a new learning theory necessary? Secondly, how does the author frame chaos as part of learning in the digital age? Thirdly, this quote, Our ability to learn what we need for tomorrow is more important than what we know today. What does this mean in the context of the article? So go ahead, take a look at the article, and we will discuss some of its key points. So this is a kind of like discussion where I will get you guys to think about it first, read, and then I will provide the explanation, so to speak.
I started blogging in the late 90s, early 2000. And as I was blogging, I found I had a very different relationship with other people and with knowledge than what I had had when I was learning in a classroom or a university program. The biggest difference I found was the way in which people are aware of one another while they're learning, and the way in which they connect and build and improve. And so somebody has an idea on a blog over here. I read about it. I write a post that incorporates some of those ideas, but try to expand it and add my own perspective. I post it. Someone else comes by and takes some of those bits and pieces and expands it and augments it and so on. We could say at a very broad level, that's exactly what science has done. This notion of combinatorial creativity, right? That we connect knowledge, we build, we grow, we advance. But at that point, it was more, for me, it was a very odd experience. As I mentioned, I was at Red River College, and so I was involved in a training, or in my interactions with faculty. I was one of the few folks in the system at that time that was very active around trying to find new ways to teach with technology. But I found online all of a sudden that there was a rich group of blogs and colleagues from other universities, other systems, and not just in Canada or US, but globally. There were some fascinating things going on in the space. And so my learning in that setting wasn't the instructivist way. It wasn't necessarily a purely self-regulated way either, where I was taking books out of the library and reading them or reading journals and so on. Instead, it was really a social connected process of learning. And that's what eventually resulted in a paper I did in 2004, where I argued that in a networked world, learning is a network forming process. Knowledge is a networked product. So when we are knowledgeable, it essentially is a reflection how we've connected concepts and ideas over a period of time. Now, getting a little bit more detail, this happens at three distinct levels. So on the one hand, literally at a biological level, learning is a network forming process. Neurons firing, neurons connecting. If we move that up one level, and this is a big level to move up on actually, but at the same level, networked learning consists of taking concepts and forming conceptual connections. So as we get a new idea, we connect it to what we already know, and that rounds out our perspective and often deepens our understanding. And at the final level is one that we're all quite familiar with actually, but that's networked learning through external social spaces. We might use tools like Twitter or Facebook or any number of future to emerge network tools. We might just be connected through our mobile devices, staying in, if we have a question, say we're a salesperson in a workforce, we have a question, we can text colleagues or those kinds of activities. But that's where the social systems and the technology systems that are now part of human knowledge, more and more part of human knowledge, become a part of our overall capacity to know.
So the reading is there, and it's for you to explore and figure out and relate to your own learning experiences, because that is what a theory is. It's like this philosophy that tells you a little bit about life, in this case learning. But I will leave you with a bunch of quotes and with two very simple illustrations. This first illustration is of a person, two people, let's say the learners. And on the left, we have resources for learning, such as YouTube, such as computers, the internet, books. These are non-human sources of information on the left. On the right, we have other people, human sources of information. So connectivism is about our relationships with networks of people and with non-human sources of information. It's about the fact that we can access all of these things. If I wanted to, I could go online and find somebody to teach me probably any language in the world that I wanted to learn. Learning becomes a process of not just taking in all information, but organizing information, knowing what to store and what not to store, knowing what's relevant and not relevant, knowing where to find the information we need when we need it. The second illustration is about how learning is lifelong. I like to say learning doesn't begin or end in the classroom, because when we go out and work, and I can tell you, when I left university, I didn't stop learning and just start applying everything. I developed and learned and grew, and whatever I learned in university was like the seed. The skills that I needed to know where to find information, what to do with that information, how to evaluate information, skills, etc. And I took these and I used it to learn more things as I worked. I never learned about university teaching. I learned about educational theory, and then I applied it to university teaching. When the pandemic came, many lecturers and educators had to completely change our approach and relearn things from scratch. And so the world is so rapidly changing today that connectivism as a theory makes more and more sense. Now let's wrap up for today. I will say the main thing that I want you to take away from today is, with regards to connectivism, I want you to just kind of think about it, to use this as a point of reflection and consider, what connectivism is and how it can apply to your own learning, because it could give you the motivation to understand the process of learning. We call this metacognition. Understand your own learning process and enhance it so that you're better prepared for lifelong learning. However, you are probably wondering what you specifically need to take away from this lecture about the assessments for this unit, and that will be the ability to ask research questions and to identify research questions. So we will be working on this in the tutorials. That's something that you might want to emphasize. Research questions, what are they? How do they guide research? Finally, there's chapter 3, and you're wondering, what's chapter 3 about? How are we going to cover that? Well, we're going to be covering it in the tutorial, but here are some questions that you can ask, which are: what skills are part of digital literacy? How do I develop these skills, and what will I use these skills for? This really builds upon the connectivist learning theory. What we will be doing is we will be discussing what digital literacy skills you think are necessary in the digital age. I provided a series of links here that you can look up if you would like to read a little bit more about it before the tutorial to prepare. These are extended readings, so you do not necessarily need to read them before the class. We will be working on digital literacy skills, trying to understand them, identify them, and all that during the tutorial. So I look forward to seeing you then.